Buenas noches, familia. Welcome to FLAB's 2020 Work in Progress Lab. My name is Marangeli Mejia Rabel. I have the honor to serve as festival director, and it's truly a pleasure to get to spend some time with you this evening. As you know, our festival works at the intersection of arts and culture and community, and building community is a really critical component of our work. We have the honor to share space with 3 filmmakers that will get to spend some time sharing their projects in different stages of their productions, and have a wonderful panel that will also share some insights, and we'll have an opportunity to do some Q&A, but I want to just share that we'll have limited time for that, so get your questions in early on. And thank you so much for making the time again to be with us. And I want to provide this wonderful panel an opportunity to introduce themselves. So we have Sara. Do you want to?
Hi. It's nice to see everyone through this medium. I'm glad that we're all able to gather here. My name is Sara Rodriguez. I'm SVP of HBO Documentary Films, and I'm pleased to join you all today.
Thank you. We also have Benny with us. Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Benny Matías. I'm a documentary filmmaker, and I've worked with a lot of nonprofits. And I've also been a founding member of the National Association of Latino Independent Producers, NALIP. So I'm very happy to be here and to be able to talk about the fabulous work that you're all doing.
Thank you so much. We have the fabulous returning Robert. Talk to us.
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. I'm Robert Chang, the coordinating producer of America ReFramed. I'm super excited to be here and to learn more about the projects, and also to be among these awesome panelists and hear their thoughts as well.
Thank you for joining us. And last but not least, we have Theresa Navarro.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for inviting me to be part of this. It's such an important time to be in community right now with fellow creatives, with people of color, with folks who are really telling stories that matter to their people and to their communities. I'm the Vice President of External Affairs at American Documentary. We are the nonprofit behind POV, the longest running doc series on American television. I'm a working mama, I'm a cultural worker, and I'm an indie producer, and I'm really proud to be here and to see this incredible work. So thank you all.
Thank you so much. So let's get into it, shall we? So first, let's welcome Tristan Seyek, and he's going to share his project, which is in pre-production, and it's Ave Maria.
Cool. Thanks, Marangeli. Hi, I'm Tristan, and I will be pitching the short documentary Ave Maria. First, I want to shout out all the people, all my friends who've been on the streets marching against classism rooted in white supremacy at the expense of Black lives by the hands of police. Second, I want to thank everyone involved in putting the festival together this year under these wild, trying times, and for the entire festival team's generosity and helpfulness. I grew up here in West Philly. My father's an Afro-Caribbean Puerto Rican man, and my mother's a first-generation Indian American. That being said, food is very important to me, and I can't think of a better way to spark a genuine conversation with someone than by over a good meal. When Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico in 2017, it really shook me up. I donated what I could, but as you probably all know, not much was accomplished initially. I felt like there was nothing I could do really personally until I noticed something that truly angered me. Puerto Rico's massive debt to the United States was being used as a scapegoat for the lack of relief efforts on the island. And I realized that many Americans had a misunderstanding about Puerto Rico. It wasn't always broke. This American territory was once an agricultural Goliath, but now 85% of goods, including food, are forced to be imported due to the Jones Act, costing Puerto Rico $537 million each year. How can a small island that's a territory of the United States also spend over $500 million for products sold by the United States? Hurricane Maria was awful, don't get me wrong, but more so, she exposed a long history of political and economic neglect by the U.S. government. I wanted to educate people on this backstory, so I launched a targeted Facebook ad in search of a documentary subject, and I was contacted by a local celebrity chef on the island, Ventura Vivoni. Chef Vivoni is a proud Puerto Rican man who runs a farm-to-table restaurant with his parents. He also has a local television show promoting local products and DIY farming. As Puerto Rican cuisine is a product of colonialism, Vivoni reclaims it by using only locally grown ingredients on the island. He aims to bring back the forgotten food of Puerto Rico while creating new Puerto Rican dishes using signature flavors. After 2 weeks of literally being left in the dark following Maria's destruction, Chef Vivoni recognized that his people, his culture, and his island were all in jeopardy. He decided to take action doing what he knows best. He served food. And for the next 8 months, Vivoni and his team served over 80,000 meals to people in need all over the island as part of a larger effort by the collective Chefs for Puerto Rico. Chef Vivoni told me his story, and that prompted me to crowdfund a small amount of money so that we could go down and capture footage of the work that he was doing. With a crew of myself and 2 of my closest friends from Drexel's film school, we flew down to PR and we shot for 8 days. Before we left, I had this overly ambitious idea that this film was going to be this big feature. My plan was to focus on the stories of the people Vivoni was helping, but when we got there, his operation had slowed down to the point where he was the only one doing the cooking, making local deliveries to people still affected in semi-remote parts of Adjuntas, a rural town between 2 mountains. We spoke with people in the area about how they were affected by the storm, but it was when we interviewed Chef Vivoni that we realized how clear the connection was between food and so many of the issues Puerto Rico faces today. And we can play the trailer.
Food security. It's very important for any kind of country. But we need to provide the meal that we need for ourselves. We'll be able to be free. I am Ventura Vivoni. I am a chef, and I'm from Adjuntas, Puerto Rico. When Maria came, that was something that really shook us all. Find out a bunch of other chefs that wanted to cook for the people, so we started gathering these people and using resources that we have to bring water and help these people that they lost everything. We can't expect the government to fix it up for us, but we, the community, had the power to empower the people to be able to feed ourselves. Puerto Rico needs to start growing their own food. I believe in my island, and I believe in the agriculture of the island. I've seen things here that I've never seen nowhere else in the world. But 95% of the stuff in the supermarket is from outside. We have the Jones Act law, and everything that comes to Puerto Rico has to go to Jacksonville and coming over here.
Now, what do the maritime law say? You have to transport goods from and to Puerto Rico in vessels that have been built in the United States.
You can't do business without having the United States Naviera as a intermedio.
So you can imagine, we are a captive economy that is basically obliged to buy from the States, and this is a good business for the States.
Everything's more expensive here, and we don't have the liberty to do business with whoever we want. We need to wake up and just fight for it. We are evolving now as a new Puerto Ricans. We are tired of being always under the shadow. It's time for us to people know us, to people understand what we are, where we're coming from, and where we are going. And that's something that we are tracing now, where we're going. We need to have cojones, we need to make it happen. This is the reality. We need to empower ourselves of our island and take it like it's our island.
Chef
Beautiful.
Vivoni, my bad. Chef Vivoni believes that the reclamation of Puerto Rico's land and food is the key to the island's future. We theorize with expert analysis that Puerto Rico can become economically self-sufficient by reverting back to an agriculture-based economy as had existed before American industrialization. However, this only works if the many unfair provisions like the Jones Act are abolished, something that could take quite some time considering the politics involved. The question then begs to be asked, what can be done by the people in the now? At the end of last week, I had a call with El Departamento de la Comida, a nonprofit farming collective led by young queer people of color in Puerto Rico that supports sustainable, resilient, and regenerative food projects. This group works with local farmers who are most vulnerable to the effects of climate change and natural disasters and helps them transition into sustainable practices that benefit the economy of their community. I believe they are a great example of how an impact can be made locally and how young people can take initiative to help their elders and with modern practices, all while being leaders themselves. I'm very happy to say that El Departamento de la Comida has signed on to be featured in our documentary to showcase this, which leads me to my next point. We still got to get back to Puerto Rico to shoot. We're aiming for another 7-day trip in March of 2021, spending 3 days at the farms in Cagua, shooting with and interviewing different members of the collective, as well as another 2 days shooting follow-up interviews with Chef Vivoni and his parents at Juntas. We'll also have 2 days to capture B-roll in other parts of the island. Additionally, we plan to conduct 3 interviews stateside with experts on Puerto Rican history, economics, and agriculture. As part of my artistic vision, I plan on incorporating animation to illustrate information-dense sections, as well as depicting an overarching narrative of Taino deities at battle with one another. This animated storyline will provide visual act breaks to show the crucial connection between the indigenous Taino, farming, and hurricanes on Borinquen. Our budget for the film currently is $165,000, and we're looking for somebody to give us all of it. And I'm 3/4 joking on that because we've only been able to raise around $5,000 since we started. In the meantime, we've been gathering lists of grants, pitches, and organizations to apply to, such as Firelight and our TDS. And we're looking for someone with crowdsourcing experience to help us plan a successful Kickstarter campaign and reach our fundraising goal. My goal for Ave Maria is to educate American audiences on these very serious issues by enticing them with the universal love of food. From here, we aim to bring awareness to the Jones Act in the hopes of getting it amended or preferably abolished. Last but absolutely not least, we hope to inspire all people, but specifically Puerto Ricans on the island, to embrace more sustainable food options that keep money within the community and can be dependable in times of peril. Amidst the chaos that surrounds us now, I've felt my attention be torn away from this project as my friends have been victims of state-sanctioned violence during the day, and sirens and explosions have kept me awake at night. In these moments, I've just had to remind myself that this film shares the very same energy as everyone marching for justice right now. The people can empower themselves and take care of each other, all while working towards systemic change for our collective future. I hope that we can all ground ourselves in this madness and find ways to do the work to make our communities a place where we can live in peace. I thank you all for your time.
Tristan, thank you so very much. So I'm going to open it to the panel to start sharing some of your thoughts.
Okay, I'll start.
Thank you.
I love it. You know, it's a very timely film. I had some questions when I was reading your materials. One of them, although Maria was traumatic and very important, you know, how are you going to, and you don't have to answer any of this now, how are you going to make it a more contemporary? Because since then, you know, the earthquakes, esto que lo otro, you know, all the stuff that's been going on. The other thing, in hearing your presentation, one of the things that you talk about is, you know, bringing new recipes, a new way of, you know, of using our local foods. And I was wondering how you were going to do that, because I've been watching, you know, like a lot of cooking programs, because I'm making a film about our Puerto Rican drink, coquito. And a lot of what I see is that in a lot of these shows, it's like what the filmmakers are bringing are all of the important social and cultural issues, but they also have the making of the dishes. So like, what types of dishes will you be working, you know, on that would show how you use, like, you know, the viandas or the beans or, you know, the whatever it is, that would really bring an audience that doesn't even know what our typical foods might be, you know, to get them to engage and to understand that it's not foreign. You know, yuca is not a foreign vianda. So I'm really excited for you.
Thank you. To answer your first question, that's the main reason why we got to get back to shoot follow-up interviews, because like the context, especially like I had like a 2.5 hour, 3 hour interview with him. The context of a lot of what he said is so much more different now with everything that's happened between the politics, the earthquakes, COVID. So I think it's crucial getting back and just getting like more, in the now type perspective from him, especially with what he was doing, so he can kind of reflect on it as well, because he was still dealing with all of that when we interviewed him. So it'd be interesting to see his perspective on it looking back. As regards to the food and his approach with food, that's more just along the lines of his character and like how he approaches his culture and his craft. The primary focus of the film is, one, the history about it and what he did, but more so just the sustainability part of food and agriculture, and just trying to keep a focus on like the foundation of food, like where it comes from.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So I'll jump in. My parents live in Huánica, so as a person that when I go to visit them fills a whole suitcase with produce, I really appreciate the premise of your film. It's something that people haven't been educated about at all. I guess the question that I have is, and I understand the desire to go back and you've got some key interviews to shoot, but as all these different filmmakers are figuring out how to shoot in this specific time of COVID where we're not able to travel quickly, one thing that I feel like I don't want you to miss in this particular story is the process of the harvest, so that we understand the growth of what they're creating. And I'm just curious if you thought of having the people on the ground kind of capture that with cell phones, so that the audience does see the progression of what they're building.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so when I spoke with Tara, she's one of the people as part of the farming collective, because I did mention that to her. I was like, if there is a way that if there's people there who have gear, because she was like, I'm friends with some filmmakers down here. So once we kind of like had that call last week, and then from that call I went and adjusted everything just to like make sure the film was good. I have a follow-up with them next week, and we're going to kind of discuss like the ins and outs of like how we're going to do it and like different timelines and stuff, so that like we can have people down there. One of my producers, Sonia, she's actually going to be flying back down soon. So she's going to be kind of taking the lead on that and making sure like all that type of remote B-roll is taken care of. So when we get there, we're kind of like focused and we're like, all right, let's get these interviews and get it done. Because like when we're there, time is money.
Yeah, I think in general, people will want to have the satisfaction of seeing the harvest, the planting, and then the yield from it.
Absolutely.
Very good. So
yeah, I wanted to offer. Oh, sorry, was somebody else?
You're muted. Yes. Okay.
Thank you so much, Tristan, for sharing this project. It's really clear that you have a lot of passion and connections to folks who have a story that needs to be shared. It made me think a lot about the shared histories of, occupation of Puerto Rico and the Philippines, where my family's from, and also just the way that colonialism and capitalism and just Western cultural hegemony really permeate every aspect of life, including our foodways, for centuries now. I wanted to say that I feel like a story like this and the way that from the trailer and from what we saw in the materials really could have a lot of mass appeal. I could see this being picked up on on a popular platform in terms of its shareability, right? Because the topic of food really does offer both like a comfort and a connection for the communities that food is that resonates with, as well as like a very accessible entry point for non-Latinx, like non-Puerto Rican audiences to kind of get interested and involved. And I'd really be keen to kind of see how animation, how you're thinking about using animation, who you're working with around that. I guess some things I'd like to offer for you, or some questions to think about, is just like, as you start to develop the story even further in the narrative, really clarity around what the focus is, like, because you have such a compelling protagonist, and every time you're working with an organization, it can be really challenging, right? Not to want to just tell the story of the organization, right? So I think the more that you kind of ground yourself and your collaborators around, is it the agricultural movement? Is it whatever it is that you're grounding yourself in? To Sarah's point and to Benny's point, this idea of how is food a framework? Is the harvest the framework? What is your concept of time? I mean, all of those things are really going to be really critical. And I would just echo, my fellow panelists' thoughts on, as much as you can kind of work with local collaborators on the ground, now more than ever, to be capturing stuff. So that's just some stuff that comes up for me as I was listening in and watching your materials. And I agree. I think Firelight, ITVS, obviously Latino Public Broadcasting would be great folks for y'all to look up to, and happy to make a connection to our friends at Kickstarter when you're ready. Yeah.
Yeah, just to touch on what you were saying, finding the focus, one of my main goals when we were there shooting, and I kept telling Alexa and Mark, my DP and producer who were there with us, I was like, this is not a bio doc. Like, it's not about Chef. Like, he's guiding the story, and it's important for us to know about him, but it's, it's not Chef Ivoni the movie. And that's why that's why I think it's crucial to bring this other organization in to kind of like bridge and show, one, just more diversity within the film, because that was something we ran into some issues when we were shooting. Every time we went to go speak with someone, all the women were like, speak to my husband. And it was like, oh, great. Like, yeah. So that's kind of what it was for me, just bringing more diversity, and then also just a different generation, because he's a generation above me, and they're, my age, very similar interests to me as well. So I figured they're great, because you said that's great, crossover stuff. That was kind of my intention, keeping it with people 18 to 35, my demographic, and, hitting them where they watch things.
Thank you so much. Robert.
I just want to echo what my panelists. I just want to echo what my panelists have said. And one of the things that, just hearing what you said now and also listening to your pitch, it was a very different film than what I read. And I think one of the key things, beyond sort of what Theresa's mentioned in terms of focusing in on your frame, and also sort of what Sara mentioned in terms of like what will provide sort of the viewers that you want the satisfaction of seeing unfold on screen in a cinematic way, but also be able to express some of these, I hadn't heard about the Jones Law. I'm not surprised that there is something like that in light of sort of US imperial footprints abroad. But in terms of if that's going to be a central piece, it isn't given the same kind of weight. And then the question about casting is sort of first and foremost in my mind, if that's actually an arc that you want to highlight in terms of sort of reflecting some of the ways in which communities are targeting policies that affect them. One of the films that most recently came out in a much more spectacular setting was Martinez Bronx Decade of Fire, right? Looking at redlining, and it's looking at redlining, which is economic policy, right? But they were able to craft the story in a very compelling way, but looking very specifically at this particular kind of policy. So definitely sort of, explore these types of films that do what you want it to do and see how they engage, making, giving life to these oftentimes dry, but very impactful kinds of policies.
Definitely. Nathan's actually a consultant producer on the project. So yeah, I've watched Decade of Fire a few times.
So Tristan, you have a few minutes left. Is there something, do you want to, provide further detail in any of the comments, or after listening to the four panelists, is there anything that you would like to share?
No, maybe to just touch on what Robert said, the materials that y'all read, yeah, it was different. I like this, what I just pitched, was in the past 4 days. I went and just changed it all. And we found the focus is really what it was. I was looking for that. I was like, I need something for the third act. I need to refresh this, because it can't just be this the whole time. And then found it, and then from there kind of like restructured, recut the trailer and all that.
Thank you so much. So I have before we moved into the next project, I just wanted to take advantage that we have a couple of minutes. Say, if you had a few words to share with anybody who's in this stage of a process with a project, what will you offer that Ave Maria has? What has been the learning in Ave Maria that you can offer to other filmmakers?
Patience. Patience is patience is number one, because I started this like not too long right after film school, and I was used to just shooting stuff, banging it out, getting it done. And this taught me, not just a lot about filmmaking, but also just like about myself and patience too. And I also realized, sometimes when you're working on something, you as the filmmaker, sometimes you need to grow in order to tell the story. And that's something I realized as well doing this. I've been doing this 2.5 years, working on this project. And I realized my own personal development helped me, see things different as well. So I'd say that. And then if we're talking like logistical stuff, go on IDA's site and look at their Core Doc app, and like, if you have money to spend, find someone like a grant writer or something and spend money on making that pop. And you can kind of use that to be your blueprint for everything, for your pitch deck, like parts of this pitch I pull from that and stuff like that. I think it's good to just start with a really good base. That's what I've learned. Foundation is key for this type of stuff.
Thank you so very much. So panelists, do you have any words that you would like to share before we moved into the production stage with filmmakers that are, this may be their first project or they're in this stage, that you will want to add to Tristan's feedback and offering?
Well, I think that one of the hardest part is when you're in pre-production, a lot of the funders want to see footage. And I think, it's really great that you were able to go down and that you were able to film and that you were able to, to edit it, and that you have those skills so that you don't need to, to depend on having to hire an editor or other people, to do a lot of the work for you. I think that's one of the biggest challenge, because it's so competitive out there. The normal sources of funding, whether it's an ITVS or, Firelight or places like that, or for Women, Chicken and Egg, it's just really competitive. And now we're competing on a global level. So, in my work with the Latino community and in, particularly with the Puerto Rican community, I know how hard it is to come from the island or to come from, our isolated communities and really try to put ourselves on a national level and make our work be competitive nationally. It's not possible. It's not impossible. It just means you just have to work harder, like in so many things in life. We just have to add a little extra elbow grease.
Thank you so much.
I would just also add that, for us, what's the most meaningful is seeing scenes versus a very tightly constructed sizzle that may showcase visuals and a sense of characters, but not really a sense of the story. And so I know that a lot of places require sizzles just in general in trailers, but I would say that, to your point of having extra materials, if there are scenes that showcase, and not that they have to be perfectly constructed, but showcase some of the characters in your film, those are so helpful, because those are the elements that help us get to know some of the people in your film that I don't think you can quite capture in a trailer.
Thank you. Robert and Theresa, before we move on.
I would say, even the best producer could not have planned probably for a pandemic or the kind of state of the world that we're in right now. So I think, there's that additional aspect of, having a solid team. I think it's really smart that Tristan is working with advisors and folks like NADA, seeking out resources. So I think that's something, especially in the pre-production stage, it's like getting as much information and having that level of, openness and vulnerability, and really wanting to kind of go on this journey, this storytelling journey, because it's obviously something you're really passionate about. So I just want to point those out as like really critical aspects, of what he's doing and how he's approaching this film, that will serve him in this time where there's so much uncertainty, right?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Tris, go ahead.
I was saying thank you.
Well, we want to thank you again for making the time. We have a minute left. I don't want to cheat, right? Because we're going to move into other projects, but I want to take the opportunity. Eli, Macha, anything that you want to offer very quickly to people in the pre-production stage? Is there anything? You're muted, Ma.
Yeah. I think that what I think Sara, I think that what Sara suggested about the harvest could be really interesting, because it brings within itself some possibility of drama, because we're about to go into storm season again, hurricane season again. So one thing that happens with harvest is that, which happened with Maria, is actually also that people lost their harvest. So it's not like an automatic thing that you want to harvest things and it just happens. There's always a possibility that it won't, or that a storm will come and will just vanish everything away. So I think that looking into that as a way to sort of bring a very organic way to bring some sort of tension and drama into the film, I think it's a good, it will be a good angle to explore.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Eli and Robert, we want to grab something from you before we go. It's you and Eli. You tell us. Either or can go. We're gonna make sure that we get something from you for the pre-production stage before we move on.
Yeah, in terms of pre-production, I think one of the most useful ways is to build connect with a group of community and collaborators to actually see how your fellow filmmakers are tackling different issues in different settings, to gain ideas for how you might want to distill the kinds of issues that you're facing in your pre-production of your story into sort of a coherent arc, right? And that's where I think some of the programs that you've listed, like Firelight and other programs, are very, very sort of adept at sort of providing sort of scaffolding support for budding filmmakers and the like. And so the more that you can tap into the kinds of resources and also contribute back to those, communities and growing those communities, I think the more vibrant, the eventual project that you will come out of this process with will be.
Thank you.
So in terms of pre-production, I'll kind of add it to what Robert said. We believe that impact doesn't happen after the film is made. So make sure to get those allies and think about creative ways of having these stories be heard, connecting with communities that can use these stories to amplify their work, and lock that in from the beginning. And I know I see your work and who you're related to and what you're doing. So I know that's already happening, but maybe putting that kind of up front in your pitch will also be helpful. And it's beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, bro. Appreciate you.
Yeah, absolutamente. Tristan, really, really honored to have the opportunity to present this project today. And we are super excited about the work ahead, and know that you're stuck with us. You're now a member of the FLAP family. So super excited. Thank you so much, everybody. And now we go into our production stage. So we have Eli Jacobs-Fantauzzi that will be presented. We will be presenting We're Still Here. Thank you, Eli.
Peace. Good evening, everybody. My name is Eli Jacobs-Fantauzzi, and I'm working on the film We Still Here, or Aquí Estamos. And I'm going to tell you a little bit of how this story came to me. I'm a Puerto Rican who was raised in the diaspora, and I co-founded a project called Defend Puerto Rico, and we were doing an exhibit in Oakland, California, and Hurricane Irma hit our island. At that point, it became a fundraiser, and we heard that Hurricane Maria was on the way. We raised funds. My house filled up with donations. Activist by the name of Rosa Clemente invited me down to the island to help tell real stories about what was happening on the island. We went out there after we heard from family and friends that it was okay, which took a couple weeks. They said, don't come yet. We need water and gas and make sure everything's okay. When we hit the island, we went all around, and it was amazing to see Puerto Rican creativity and resilience and people stepping up in a time of need. And I was so inspired, and I knew that I could help by telling stories and also with my hands and resources from back home. So a week was up. I was at the airport in tears, heading back to Northern California. I landed at JFK, and they told me Northern California forest fires had happened. And so my job that I was going back to was canceled. I went back to JetBlue's counter and said, put me on the next flight back to Puerto Rico. I've been living on the island for 2.5 years now, and this is the project and the story that I want to tell. So with those funds and the support from the Puerto Rican diaspora, we ended up in Comerío, this mountainous town in the center of the island, and they had a vision. They were organized, and they were ready to make it happen. And what they needed was help and resources to do that. So this project, I started filming for crowdfunding campaigns. We were rebuilding roofs. We were, for Choana and Chino, 4 kids, their complete house was gone. So we raised over $10,000 right away to rebuild, and people could see where their money went and felt connected to those stories. And so this project evolved into a film that is now called We Still Here. Let's watch the trailer.
Isla del Caribe, toda la tristeza que hay en mi tierra la tiene el bambú.
Cuando estaba llegando el huracán María, vimos cómo el río estaba entrando al pueblo, cómo los negocios se estaban inundando.
Mi cuarto era ahí, y como ya ven, pues ya no hay nada.
Y ahí fue cuando vimos nuestro pueblo destrozado. Y ahí comenzó la otra parte de María.
Es que esperaba más del municipio, del gobierno, para las personas que perdieron sus casas, sus hogares. O sea, están muy lentos, o sea, me decepcionaron en esa parte.
En mi comunidad, 25 familias perdieron sus techos, y de esas 25, solamente 6 recibieron la ayuda de FEMA en la instalación de toldos.
Compartir, eso es la felicidad. Para que el que te pregunte a ti alguna vez, ¿qué felicidad? Dice, no, felicidad es compartir. Eso es así. Con los que no tienen.
La casa de mi tío quedó destrozada. Todas las paredes cruzaban.
Maria unveiled the reality that was underneath the surface. And I think for many of us, we knew for many years how alone we were and how much the government didn't have our backs and how much being a colony was so debilitating to ourselves and to our sustenance, right, and our well-being as a people.
Es algo que siempre me ha gustado hacer, ser líder, ayudar. Esto soy yo. Conmigo, yo voy a ser su guía turística en el día de hoy. Mucho gusto, María.
Trata de ser original.
En mi comunidad hay 25 hogares y aún no tienen techo.
¡Boom! Y si no puedes ser perfecto, trata de ser original. Y es que tú tienes el control de tu cuerpo, lo puedes lograr. Busca tu luz, sé tu confianza, plenitud, baila.
How it is that you envision the future of your community, right? So how is it that you envision infrastructure, education, community workforce, economic development, solar power, water?
De empoderar líderes, de darle un voto y voz a nuestra comunidad.
Que mira, sí, uno se puede autoorganizar, porque eso es parte de lo que nos hemos dado cuenta en esta isla, es que el gobierno no está. O sea, María delató la falta de apoyo que tenemos gubernamental en este país.
Haremos el cambio a nivel país. No es solo por uno, también es por la comunidad, por el que viene, porque hay que tomarlo de forma colectiva. No es decir yo, es decir somos. Y aquí estamos.
Okay, thank you so much. And thank you for this opportunity to uplift and hear these stories. I've been an independent filmmaker for 20 years now, and I don't believe on waiting for these stories to be told or waiting for some type of funding or resources from other people. That we have to get these stories out no matter what. And that's, you feel that energy, hopefully, in the trailer and in the work that I do. This film is going to help give a model to the world of what just recovery looks like. And that vision has to come from the community itself. That what we saw after Hurricane Maria was not the way forward. That dropping water bottles out of helicopters and the corruption that was going on. If we want to help people, it has to come from the community. They have to lead it, and we have to help them with resources and amplify their stories. So I'm really excited that this can be a model, especially in these times. I created what I call participatory action filmmaking, and it comes from my mentor, Dr. Pedro Noguera, who does participatory action research. It's where we don't see the people in our film separate from ourselves, that we are part of it, and that what the role that we play also plays a role in their success of whatever project or whatever revolution or whatever movement that they're part of. And so I also believe that this film is going to be an example of that the stories that are being told and the development it's in this community is from the group telling this story as well. And that's fundamental in my work. It's very important in this time to focus on the youth. The youth are creating the change that is needed in this world. And when I hear stories across the board on television and distribution channels, it's not from the youth themselves. And if we want to create a change, they're the ones that are going to do it. They're the ones that are going to implement it. And so I'm very excited to be able to give Marianne, Yayo, and the rest of the youth in this community the opportunity to be heard around the world. We've already been able to follow them to Washington, D.C., march in the halls of Congress, put their lives on the line, travel on airplanes for the first time. And in this film, you get to see their growth. A question that I always ask myself is, how do we get youth to be politically involved or engaged civically? And this film will also show that. This film will show that once you deserve that you're worth more, you will demand more. And I want to say that initially I thought this film would be used for people on the front lines, right? Especially in climate justice and just recovery efforts. And it already has been picked up. Just this trailer is already on a revisioning recovery tour that's happening nationally by Working Films. And now we know that the front lines are everywhere. In this global pandemic, we see that everywhere is a front line. We are the front lines, and the people that are hurt first in the worst are always poor Black and brown communities. And what is the way forward? And this film is going to show that. And so it's really a worldwide story that we're trying to be told now. I see it in a new way with this moment of Black Lives Matter and with this global pandemic. So where am I at financially? We raised over 50K, and we've been telling this story for about 2.5 years. I got a East Bay Foundation grant that was like a matching grant, and it happened right when COVID hit. And so I didn't know what to do. I didn't feel like I wanted to ask people for support and money in this time when your own personal finances are unsecure. So I just took about 2 weeks to breathe. I was in touch with them, and we decided to move forward. And we are asking for $8,000 for the next round of production. And we raised $15,000, and that just ended a few weeks ago. We believe that with 130K, we'll be able to finish the project entirely to the level that we believe is deserved. And we have a robust impact strategy and plan. I created what I call a living documentary. And that means that these are real people who are alive. And so you get to interact with them on the point. I went to NYU for interactive art. And this is a concept that I've been working with since then in the early 2000s, is how to create what we call an interactive living documentary. And the more people that interact with it, the more that it grows. And the future is determined by the people who interact with it. And so an example of that would be Maria Angeli Ortiz, who is the lead in this film, received the OSA grant and is now getting funds, and her future has completely changed path because of that. And that's a living documentary example. I want to thank you for this time and this opportunity. Thank you, Philadelphia Latino Film Festival and the panel for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. So I'll open it up. Thank you so much, Eli. Open it up to the panel. Thank you. That was quite a treat. So who wants to open up? Sara?
Unmuting. Sorry, I was unmuting. So after watching the trailer, the effectiveness of it, I would say, is that I just wanted to know what happens. And I'm curious for you what your timeline is for shooting or capturing this story. When, what's the structure of the story, and how do you know when it's done?
Thank you. The structure of the story is actually 1 year. So they go to DC in 6 months, and then 1 year they do a visual in their community where they come out with candles beautifully and think about all the progress that has been made. It doesn't do a hard stop at 1 year, because we'll either from the beginning or the end, we're talking about them, again, being civically engaged in Puerto Rico, something that had never happened before and has been an inspiration to the world, is young people taking to the streets and kicking out the governor with the Ricky Renuncia movement. So we're gonna put that in there kind of as this is still happening. Once you're engaged, you don't just stop being engaged. This is what happens when you want to see the change that you're fighting for. The other question was, that's the art.
Yeah, just how do you know when you stop? But if you're thinking about it in a year, that makes sense. I'm curious what we'll see in terms of how the communities progress. And I also love that we're showing these people coming from a place of strength and taking control of their narrative.
Yes, definitely. So some of the through lines in the story is the rebuilding, right? And that rebuilding of houses and families being able to come back into their homes is also happening in the nature. Like we're talking about a tropical island, a lush green island that didn't have leaves. And so we're paralleling that growth to the environment, and that happens naturally. What we really want to do with, we have 2 more rounds of production of filming that we want to do is, as you can see from the trailer, is very raw, and we love that. It's very on the go. But we want to go now and do some more, I would say, eye candy, some professional filming to really capture where you are and the beauty that surrounds this area, as well as some little intimate vignettes that we could get into the family's lives a little more than what we did initially. And that's what these next 2 rounds of production will do.
And how long did you spend with the community and the family? Was it mostly verite shooting?
A lot of verite shooting, and I'm still with them. It hasn't stopped. The project continues to grow. They put up solar, they put up water encatchment programs, and that's why it's gonna live. But in terms of this film, we never stopped going to the community. We filmed it from beginning to end. We created a project called Mensajeros de Palomas, where they record themselves and they tell their own stories. Yayo has become the director of communications. School was stopped by Hurricane Maria. When he re-enrolled, he went into communications. He's gonna be a storyteller. He is a storyteller now. And that's that kind of wraparound love that I'm talking about. For this change to happen, it needs to be all in.
Thank you. The beautiful project.
You know, I had some similar thoughts about it. One of the things that I wanted to know was more of their personal lives, and you know, you're saying that they're filming themselves, and sort of like that intimacy of them really talking about their dreams, their frustrations, because a lot of this community work, you have to build coalitions with your neighbors, and that's always really, really hard. So kind of like, you know, how they've been able to talk about some of those challenges, because I didn't want it to stop at that stage where I felt removed, and it's like, oh yeah, you know, the hurricane happened, you know, they got together, they're, you know, putting all of this together. Like what you talk about, you know, the first time on a plane, you know, like if there's like a footage of that, because that's an awesome experience for someone, you know, that comes from wherever. You know, the first time you go to a big airport and you do that, or, you know, walking down the halls of these congressional places in DC, you know, that type of stuff where all of a sudden they're faced with a bigger world, and how they have to like really interact with that larger world that doesn't necessarily want to hear them. And I love what you're doing, participatory documentaries. Sure, great.
Thank you, Benny. I appreciate it. And I like what you said. We have a longer cut of the trailer that gets more into the personal life. Maybe I can send it to you if you.
Oh, yeah, I would love to see it. Mm-hmm.
Very good. Robert?
Yeah, no, I'm, you know, I think sitting from the perspective of a broadcaster, and, you know, we're usually looking at, you know, the production of a film and it as a cultural product. And I think one of the things that you so emphatically state is that impact is not something that comes after the production of the film. It's something that's built in to your production process, and which opens it up as a form of cultural activism and a form of cultural production that is beyond just the necessary end product sometimes of the kinds of films that that I most oftentimes encounter. And so I think that's super, that is a really great and engaged way to understand what it means to tell stories, right? And what it means to have these workshops. And I'm assuming though you haven't stated it, that the vignettes that you hope to engage with are part of the collaborative process of production, right? That this is built into the ways in which you are understanding the stakes of what it means to tell a story, and how the stories, characters, and arcs may not be the kinds of 3-act structures that are standard conventional types of broadcast documentary, but are there, and then but rather more engaged with the everyday lives of the people with which you're collaborating. And so since that is, if that is something the case, and then the question for me, and I'm very curious to hear your thoughts about, is sort of like where, you know, with your research on interactivity, is how then can this living documentary live in other formats and forms beyond that of the cinematic, which requires certain conventions of storytelling, arc, and characters, even if they're unconventional characters.
Thank you so much, Robert. I appreciate it. So I'm a co-founder of DeFem Puerto Rico, which is a transmedia project. And we believe in telling stories all kinds of ways. And our bridge is really the diaspora and the island. And so what we've used is AR, augmented reality. We use virtual reality. We do photos. We do video. And we use where people are at, bring the stories to them, not necessarily having to get them to you. This isn't a theater, or for that matter, not even a TV screen. How do you get it to the people? And they're on social media, and so we bring it to them, and we give it to them in ways that they can receive it in shorter chunks to tell those stories. And so we've been at this for over 3 years. It started in 2016, and it's grown exponentially and has a lot of engagement there. So we're going to be using those practices here on this platform to tell these stories. And I love what like Decade of Fire has done. They created modules after the film about different communities that are going through certain things, and using those in those cities to workshop. I think that's powerful. I'm in Puerto Rico, and I created what's called Cine Solar, which is to bring a solar cinema project directly to the communities. So we toured Decade of Fire. I put together a tour for them all around the island with activists and organizations to have particular conversations of how that film could be used in different communities. This is the work that we do, and this is the work that we know is needed to create the change that we want. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you so much. Theresa?
Yeah, thank you, Eli, for sharing this. I wanted to give a shout out to the Bay. I wanted to give a shout out to Defend PR and Mikey Cordero and the Costa Cookout and all of that good community vibes that you represent. So, and it's really clear from, you know, what I saw and what I read. And I first want to offer just kind of initial reactions. It's, you know, this was such a tonal experience for me. Really are making, it really evokes a lot of the conversations we've been having in the industry around decolonizing documentary and these practices that we're really thinking about in terms of, you know, docs for the people, by the people, in terms of the imagery that you're already starting to pull out. There's this aspect of, yes, devastation, but it's, and, you know, as you're talking about what you did with your hands in terms of rebuilding roofs and even the kind of small sound bites that I heard of, you know, the 6 out of 25, you know, roofs being repaired just in that one person's testimony. So there is that framing of that. But I think what I appreciated about what I saw was that it wasn't just natural disaster porn. You know what I mean? That it really was about framing the people, like per your title, it's about folks who are still here, you know, and there's that aspect of agency and voice that I hope you retain through the project, right? There's also this element of haunting, right? From your music and a lot of the framing and the spectral gaze from the sky. So there's that aspect of third cinema that I really wanted to kind of just shout out in terms of what you're doing and what you're trying to do. What I appreciate most about the project, I think, is that, like my colleagues are saying, this idea of the model for impact, which is a follow-up question in terms of, like, you know, where do you imagine this going? Like, what is your ideal trajectory for a film like this, if it isn't necessarily, and this moment, honestly, for festivals and for theaters alike, like the industry itself, for better or worse, is going to be changed, right? And films like this actually can do better, like in a moment like that, I would argue. So I'd love to kind of hear a little bit about where this goes, and if you can clarify, because it wasn't in the materials, is this a feature, is this a short, is this a series? Like, per your background in kind of non-linear, right, non-traditional formats, I could really imagine this taking on a lot of different shapes. So can you speak to that for me?
Thank you so much, and thank you for your comments. So this film is going to be about an hour. Its broadcast length is the ideal for what we're searching for. Like I said, I've been doing this for 20 years, independent filmmaking, and I've never in my life received a film grant, like an established filmmaking fund. And I believe that's because that they tell the similar stories over and over again. And it's hard to break into an industry that, one, you don't necessarily agree with how they're doing it, and you don't have the resources to do it competitively on the side. And so this is the first time that I was able to receive a smaller film grant in my life, which was the Working Films Grant, and be able to produce something now and knock on doors and say, we believe this story should be told and should be told in this way, and this is the way that we want to do it. And I believe we're at that moment. So I want to go the traditional documentary route, because I believe if you have a successful film, you turn that many heads, you have that big of a cultural impact, then all the other stuff can ride that wave, be more impactful, and go more deep than just the original product of a film. And so that's where we're starting. But like I said, we don't wait for anybody. We're going to get it done. We've been getting it done. And yes, it's full speed ahead. Even with the coronavirus, I'm stuck here in California because I came out here for film festivals that got canceled, and I didn't want to get on a plane. And so we're sending literally hard drives back and forth. So I got the footage, and we're setting editing notes, and we're here still applying for film grants, and we're moving forward. This isn't going to stop. I appreciate you.
Two folks that I'd like you to kind of like look into. One is the Bertha Foundation, because they do have grants that could speak to that. I don't know if you've applied to them yet. The other would be the Fledgling Fund, which is a California, I believe that they're based in Cali, but they do have actually like an impact fund specifically for climate stories. So those are just two things I think, as you're kind of entering the more traditional documentary funding space, to get on their radar. And I think they're both really great in terms of, Bertha and Doc Society run Good Pitch Local. So there are other opportunities to get this story in front of funders and stakeholders. And a potential partner, as you're talking about youth and climate justice, could be folks like the Sunrise Movement. If you're familiar with them, there are youth-led climate justice organizations. So just some resources off the top of my head, but please continue on, stay strong, stay the course. It feels like it's an important story. And one last thing I'll offer is that many of our filmmakers right now, and many of our storytellers and creators are thinking, there's so many other things that are going on right now, which is true. But particularly the story of the resilience of Puerto Rico, and the way that this story and the folks can actually be a resource for this moment in terms of environmental justice, climate justice, and communities who are, like everybody is saying, really about coalition building, right? And solving things that the governments are failing to do. That's what's happening right now across the country, and my background and my schooling was in Hawaii, and a lot of our politics there was really about like, this is not the mainland, like where you are is the mainland, right? So this idea of like the island being the mainland and that just being the continent, like there are elements of that I can also see as well. So just some things I'd like to offer, but yeah, thank you so much for sharing this with us.
Thank you. Thank you. So we have a couple of minutes left. So I'm going to ask the same question that I asked Tristan. So Eli, we're going to start with you since you were wrapping up now. What will you tell, what will your words of wisdom or your 2 cents will be your offering to a filmmaker as it relates to the production stage? You're like, ¿dónde empiezo?
Yeah. Again, this is a life's work. Be dedicated to it. See it through. It's hard to even call it a project, you know. Go all the way in, and there is no failure. There are just aspects of learning, you know, and from every step that we didn't accomplish what we wanted to, maybe we accomplished something different, and we continue forward. And in the film industry, that I feel like they always say, you know, try to become a secretary and then slowly make your way up. I never believed in that. I don't stand for that model. Go out there and do it. It's our response. These stories will not be told if we don't do it. And whatever resources that you have available to you, use that and tell these stories, and keep knocking on the doors. If they're not mutually exclusive, do what you do and keep knocking on the doors, and it will come.
Very good. Thank you so much. Anybody else? Very quickly.
Yeah. I have one comment. It'll be brief. Both of the budget numbers that have been presented so far seem fairly low to me. And I think that as you're developing and as you're continuing, that you really have to make a very strong case for why it is that you can finish your films with such little money. Because if you're thinking of any archival footage, you know, if you're thinking of any music, or if it's going to be broadcast, you know, errors in omission and all of that, that's just going to eat up money. So I suggest that, you know, that you all work with someone on those budgets, because even if you don't want to go to an ITVS, but you want to go to a POV, you know, they're going to be asking a lot of those questions. So if you want to go to Firelight, so that you know how you're answering those questions. We're used to working with very little money, but the rest of the world kind of goes, como, you know, this is poverty, you know. So let's really understand where you're coming from, and don't take crap from anyone about your budgets.
Thank you. It's hard. Having not received it, it sounds like, you know, you're asking for something huge and unattainable, but I hear you 100%. Thank
you.
Yeah, just to piggyback off of that, don't lowball and let somebody tell you no first.
Thank you. All right. Thank you so much, Macha. Tristan? Before we move on, anything? You good? You have one word. You have something. You're muted. Gisela, you're muted. Okay. Very good. Well, thank you so much. And now, last but not least, we're going to go into post-production and talk about timing. Macha got to wrap the shooting of her film exactly one day before Puerto Rico went on a stay-at-home order.
Well, exactly 1 day before being declared state of emergency, 3 days before the quarantine and lockdown began. So, hi, I'm Macha Colón. I'm a Afro-Caribbean queer interdisciplinary artist. And I'm working on my first feature film, and it's a narrative. It's about Isabel, a woman who widows and finds herself without nothing to do, and her neighbor invites her to decorate a funeral of a neighbor who was broke. So, and she finds that the space of funerals become a space where she can express her creativity. So she begins decorating funerals in a peculiar way. And that's all I'm going to say. I'm going to show you a clip that lasts almost 10 minutes. It's a piece of the film. We're editing like now, this week. So I did the subtitles myself last night because I realized that I needed to put subtitles on it. It's in Spanish. So please be kind. I hope you enjoyed and have questions afterwards.
Thank you. So now we check Perfume de Gardenias.
Sí, está bien. Vamos a necesitarlo, lleva mucho.
¿Mucho?
Si quieres llevarlos todos, los vamos a necesitar.
Todos, olvídate.
Sí, se van a usar.
Todos.
Todos. Y los vamos a necesitar como quieran.
Para el huracán se hizo bastante buenas ventas. Después pues bajó un poco ya.
Bueno, sí, la gente se queda con poco dinero.
Exacto, con poco dinero, pues esa es la situación que tenemos.
Así, eso también.
Pues entonces déjame ir haciéndole la listita aquí.
Sí.
¿Y para qué ustedes quieren todo eso?
Ya van a traer el ataúd, pero tengo que salir corriendo a buscar algo que me falta. Y Claudia me va a llevar. Cuando llegue el féretro, y le pones esto encima con los cables hacia atrás. Pero no lo conectes.
Pero vuelven enseguida.
Sí, enseguida, claro. viene a buscar, me llama. Cuando ay, Dios.
Buena.
Ajá, hola.
¿Cómo estás?
Estoy bien. Vengo de la funeraria. Digo, vengo y me tengo que ir enseguida otra vez. Lo que pasa es que es el velorio del carpintero. Si quiere puede pasar por allá.
Déjame ver cómo me siento.
Usted se ve lo más bien.
Es que me cambiaron los medicamentos.
Ah, bueno, qué bueno. Que sea con lo que Dios quiera.
Recuerde que a la orden ahí.
Sí, gracias.
Wow, mami, qué guapa.
Gracias, gracias.
Estoy cocinando para las 2.
Ay, bendito, ¿para qué te pusiste a hacer eso?
¿Tú comiste?
Sí.
¿Qué?
Un café y una tostada.
Espérate. Mira para acá. ¿Se puede saber para dónde tú vas tan elegante?
A la funeraria.
Te ves muy linda.
Mira, con eso que tú sacas fotos ahora.
No empieces.
Yo no te estoy criticando. Ay, Dios mío, es que uno no puede decirle nada a ustedes. Yo no te voy a decir cómo tú tienes que vivir tu vida. Tú sigue haciendo lo que te gusta y aprovecha lo que tienes.
Por lo menos prueba lo que hice.
Sí, a ver. Qué rico, ¿qué es eso?
Es una fritata de espinaca, tomate y queso de cabra.
Es raro, pero me gusta.
Déjame servirte entonces.
No, gracias. Sí, me vienes a buscar ya.
Bueno, por lo menos estás entretenida.
Yo no necesito entretenerme. Hablamos pronto.
Es normal que la gente no entienda algo tan sofisticado.
Bueno, yo no quería decir nada, pero a mí me parecía bien loco.
Ay, ¿qué sabes tú? Yo puedo tener malos gustos, pero yo sé cuando algo está coco.
No te preocupes. El próximo funeral a la gente le va a encantar.
I should have said it's a dramatic comedy with dark humor. So I just was trying to say so much at the beginning to get into my 10 minutes. So I guess that's over. So.
No. You actually have a couple of minutes, I will say, if you want to add something about the clip before we go on.
Yeah, I mean, this was the first funeral that she makes, that she decorates, that her friend Tonya kind of like, in a way, manipulated her a little bit into doing it. So the first time we're seeing her creating this style of funerals, which is what she's going to continue doing. And for those who don't know, I mean, in Puerto Rico, there's been like a trend in the last couple of years of it came about because of someone who is a young guy who sort of worked in the drug traffic world and knew he was most likely going to die into a funeral home nearby. He gave them the clothes and said, listen, the day that I die, I want to wear this clothes and I want you to do something special. I want you to stand me up in the corner of my apartment and the wake should be in my home. And then the Muerto Parado, became this thing that needed to be done. And even though it doesn't get that much of media coverage anymore, but it keeps growing and, it keeps happening. And for a while, it was pretty big. We had the motorcycle guy, we had the guy in the ambulance, we have the grandma in the rocking chair with her pack of cigarettes. And so I just wanted to sort of give a nod to that. So it never gets to that point of manipulating the body, because I don't think it goes into the style of this character. And like I said, we're in post-production. It's a co-production with Colombia, and we're doing most of the post-production over there. And we still need some funding. We actually went into production without having all the money because we felt pressure also because obviously, we didn't, our whole cast are all the women. Our main character, Luz Maria Rondon, it's a pretty well-known actress in the theater world, especially in television. And she's now 87 years old. So we felt we really needed to move on and not, keep waiting. So we've been on production or trying to find the money for like around 5 years. And we're still missing like around 125,000. And so we're doing what we can with what we have so far. So we're moving on.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Macha, for sharing that. So I want to give an opportunity to the panel to start getting into it and asking some questions or sharing some comments.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. It was so lovely to see the world that she was operating in. I think, the biggest challenge for this, and I had looked at the written materials, is as you're completing and not necessarily having something that's finished to show, the written treatment almost has to work overtime in terms of atmosphere and really being very descriptive of the world and the characteristics of the people. And so I think that one thing that I would look at is there somebody that you can bring on that can be that person that's very descriptive, that can help you craft a written treatment that will, I guess, get people a little bit more excited and also set them in a time and place where they really understand, even if they don't understand this cultural thing that she's specifically doing, that they'll be immersed in the world.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I think it's absolutely beautiful. I love the dialogue. It's de oído, it's like how we talk. So it's not like, like film dialogue. And the other thing that I love is how you're working with older actresses who are not getting, a lot of chances to really show their craft and what they can do. Dark humor, hey, Caribbean, Puerto Rican, what I have to say. And I do agree with Sara that in the written materials, there was a layer that was missing. I could intuitively bring it in because I knew about, El Muerto de Pie, and in a lot of different cultures, particularly within the narco gang culture. It's very common to have these very elaborate funerals. But what I love is that you're spinning it on its head and that you're really looking at an older woman who's really she's being an artist. And it's not about her, it's about the people that are being buried. And it's about honoring who they were. So I do agree with Sara that, to be able to give more of that, and I don't know if you had like a word count or, only so much that you could submit to this process, but that would really have people understand where the film is going to go and why it's going to be kind of, one of those quirky films that festivals love, and that, it's great. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I think that's something that happens as well, is that, because I'm a multidisciplinary artist and I work in different, disciplines, and I'm a performer, and I approach whatever I do, my audiovisual work, even in documentary, I bring that element of performance into it. And Marangeli knows this because you've seen some of my work, but the movie became something else, became something on its own. Once I did it, it's sort of like, I realized, which is, I knew it was going to happen, but it was really beautiful to see how it sort of became something else that was separate from the written word. So I think I understand your reaction, because the written things that I have do not reflect anything of what I have now, because it sort of grew, it changed, and once when I filmed it, it became something more, I think, alive and colorful, So.
Right, but now you have it filmed. So now it's easier to go back and write those treatments that will really bring your other investors.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Theresa, Robert?
I was just completely mesmerized by the soundscape, by the characters, by the unfolding, the shots, the softness, and in the conversation that we've been having, sort of the question of the memorial and remembrance and what that means, was quite present and strong in the scene that you showed. And I think, in terms of a film, I definitely agree with Benny in terms of like it's a film. I think it's a film with the right, I think, with the right meta text, right, will bring people in and suck them in. And I think and I'll just sort of reemphasize that you don't have to be the person who writes it. Somebody you trust who's a good wordsmith can. And I think that's one of the things about sort of when you hit a certain stage of your filmmaking practice, is that you need to bring aboard collaborators who, you're bringing so much to the table, and others that can help put the work that you're doing forward, so that larger audiences and different audiences will be able to get drawn in.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, Macha. Thank you for sharing this. Yeah, I love people who are as interdisciplinary. All of these genres are just arbitrary, right? In terms of fiction, nonfiction, like it's really one informs the other, right? And some of my first ones are all narrative films, and I think that's one of the biggest challenges for an indie narrative, is that it really is the entire piece, the entire journey you want people to go on with you. Whereas sometimes with docs, you can get people in just with the topic or the issue. You know what I mean? So it's like, I really want to learn about this thing. And sometimes folks look to documentary to kind of teach them. But narratives are really a different type of space and a different type of beast. And so that's where I really would, echo what folks are saying around the written treatment, specifically like your ability. We're talking about agency to own the synopsis of your story, right? Before somebody else tries to frame it for you, especially because you're such an artist and it's so clear in both, maybe what the protagonist is reflecting is elements of your own attitudes towards art. But it also has these like universal themes, I think, around cultural attitudes around death, and made me think about films. Like there's a Japanese film called Departures that it made me think about. There's a Philippine film called Crying Ladies, because there's elements of how each community and each culture, both the kind of stuff that people see and also like the very unique, right, things that might be very specific to a particular group within a culture. And so I agree. I think it has the ability to kind of have a festival life. And I'm wondering, you know, what is your running time that you're thinking about on this?
Can you repeat the last part? What's my what?
Your running time.
Well, it turns out that we just did a first cut and it was like shy of 2 hours. So it is going to be a long film. It needs the time because I didn't want to follow. I like to work and mix sort of like a commercial language, but with a theme that's not so much commercial. And so my visual language can be very accessible, but my structure, it's not necessarily that traditional. So we start with the whole beginning of the film. Well, obviously, if we had more time, I would have shown you because it's really beautiful. We get to see the life of this woman and what she does like every day of just cleaning and taking care of his bedridden husband, and you know, so it takes up. I take a little bit of time to sort of establish that, so it's not like a quick thing. And from everyone that have shared the first cut, I was also scared, and even I was scared to what the producer's reaction is going to be for the length, but we'll realize that it's going to be like at least an hour 45 minutes film, which I know that usually for festivals it's kind of like a scary thing, but I think that things are changing because everyone's going, with all this that's happening with COVID, and I just think that the audience can handle that. Thinking about platforms like digital platforms, I think people can handle like longer films. That's sort of my impression, but I think that the story needs it. There's a lot of elements, and I just think that the story needs it. So
yeah, I would have like one more comment. And in a lot of the independent feature films that I see, many times the third act gets a short shrift. So to make sure that when you're building your third act, that you give it enough time to play. And a lot of times what I've seen is that also the first act gets a lot of time. So, really think about, how you're going through the time element of, how long the first, the second, the third, these things that you as an artist know, but, sometimes when I see these films, I just kind of go, oh, I wish they had really dedicated more time to the third act or a little bit less to the beginning, because I don't need the setup to be that long. I want to get, to the nut of it. And I didn't mean to interrupt you, Theresa.
Oh, no. I think what's interesting, like to piggyback off what you're saying is, your background as a doc editor, Macha, like how much of that did you have to throw out the door as, the key creative, like director, producer on a story like this? And, I think Benny had mentioned it earlier on the dialogue. That's one of the hardest things, right? In narrative is script and dialogue and making it feel authentic. And that's one of my favorite things about doc, is you're really capturing what people's words are and the spirit of people themselves, framed, however that is. So how did your doc background and your doc editing background affect or have to be completely, out the window as you were approaching this particular film as your first indie narrative?
I always say that, first of all, it's interesting because editing came into my life around the same time that screenwriting came into my life. For both things that require a lot of time. I think that you to learn to be good, you need to put in a lot of time into it. So I had to make the decision, and I was so in love with editing, and it surprised me so much that I sort of pushed aside screenwriting. It's something that and maybe because it scared me also a lot more, because I think that you have to be very vulnerable to be a good writer, and editing is so incredibly creative, but you can hide behind other people's work unless it's your own work, and that's another thing. But you can sort of hide behind the work, In writing, I think you have to put yourself out there, and that's something that it can be very scary. But it just sort of came back up. Like it was sort of like I needed to do it. It just kept coming back, and also editing actually. I think I learned from like what elements I needed to be able to tell story, or were the basic things I needed to tell a story. And because I also worked mostly in social issue political documentaries, and resources are so limited. You have to be quick and how much footage you have and what you do with it. I'm a magician of taking like a little bit of material and creating something powerful. Yes, I am a great editor, I have to say it. But it taught me a lot about what sort of like the basic things that I need to sort of be able to tell the story. And then from there, I learned that it wasn't just telling the story, but how do I make people feel something? And it was just sort of like one thing led me to another. I mean, but you're right. When it came time then to prepare to directing, which everyone would tell me all the time, you have to take off your editor hat. You have to take off your editor. So I was very conscious of that. And I was scared. I was like, oh my God, I hope I was able to take off my editor hat, But I was so, because at the same time I have been developing also as a performer, I was very intrigued about that relationship and that dynamic with the actors and what happens with the words and how do you bring to life words and make it seem natural. And there's such a interesting, thing there. It's like almost like a magic, or at least it is to me. I work a lot from my intuition. It's very from my gut. So like I can read a lot of things and then I just push them aside, and it's like, okay, whatever I remember, that's what I'm going to use. So I was very conscious about it, and I just sort of I hope that I'm doing the best, and I sort of trust that I care mostly for the story that I'm telling. In everything that I do, that's really what I try to remember. That to me, the most important thing and the essence of my work, it has to be what I'm trying to tell, what story I'm trying to tell, and why it's important to say it. And I just let that sort of guide me, So, and I cross my fingers.
Thank you.
You're on mute.
I know. I double
waiting for you to say something.
Estoy double clicking, es el problema. I double clicked by mistake, my apologies. So thank you so much. We're gonna do this quick flash round of what are your words, what is your offering for those that are joining us, for somebody who is on your stage of production. What will your 2 cents be?
Me?
Yeah, we can start with you, and then we'll ask Eli, we'll ask Tristan, we'll ask the group, and then we'll get into questions.
I don't know. I think this is like Eli was saying. I think this is hard work. It's really hard, and I think your heart has to be in it. You have to believe in it. It's really hard work. So I mean, it's hard work, but it's enjoyable. I mean, I believe I'm doing this because it makes me happy. I'm trying to be a happier person in everything that I do. And I'm trying to contribute to a world where people can be happier also. So that's sort of like my one of my major guidelines. So that's sort of, I try to apply that to everything. But that doesn't mean that it's not hard work. It is hard work. But my heart is in it, and I just don't think about it. I think this is what I'm supposed to do, and I'm gonna give it my all.
Thank you. Tristan.
So I'll say, Macha, wow, so beautiful to see your expression in this way. I've been able to experience in other ways, and I really love it. So in post-production, it goes also to impact mode, and you have amazing people like Marangeli and people that run festivals, and you have your crew. Make sure to show it to people. I think as you feel more confident about your story and what you want to do, then now you could put it into the world and let that come in. I think it's hard when you put it out too early, and then you have one way you want to take it, but you're hearing other things. Feel confident with what you want, and then ask people and ask the community and actors, actresses, your collaborators in Colombia. And I think that'll help kind of give it that final, their comments and how they receive it. If you could be with them or watch them while, as a filmmaker, I love that. Watch the audience as they watch it. So maybe, I don't know if we could do that in person right now, but maybe do an online screening where you could look at their faces when they watch it. Do they go closer? Do they, get tired? What's their physical appearance like? I love all that information. Congratulations, Macha.
Tristan, we have 1 minute.
What's the question again? I'm so sorry. What was
I just wanted what do you have to share or to offer to filmmakers that are in this stage of a project?
Like in post? Yeah, I come from more of a narrative and music video background. Documentaries kind of new for me. So my approach to post is, that's where you gotta spend your money. Your color and your sound I feel like are crucial to, making your work stand out and making it be taken seriously, especially the sound mix, because it's something that you don't really notice when it's really good. But when it's bad, you kind of tell. So I feel like, making sure you work with the right people who are good at it. And the technical stuff, I feel like that's what separates good from great.
Very good. Thank you so much. So we have some questions and some comments. I want to be mindful of time. We have around 9 minutes, so I'm going to start with a comment from Eduardo Alegría, who says, El Departamento de la Comida are pioneers. So he goes with that. Then there's a question for We Still Here. How do you see your film challenging narratives about Puerto Rico?
I think it's challenging that there aren't many stories being heard, So I think one first aspect is just getting more stories about Puerto Rico heard, and number two, that they come from Puerto Ricans, and then number three is that they come from the communities themselves, and that they're empowering stories about the people, and they have agency in their own story.
Thank you. We have another comment from Rachel Torrin. Amazing, looks great. Thank you for this. Got a question from Marcela C. Guerrero for Perfumes. How do you choose the music? The contrast between the more lyrical music at the beginning and the reggaeton is quite stark. That's actually for, yes. So I didn't I'm going to say that question is for Eli. That question is for Eli. I was like,
for the music.
Like, there's no reggaeton.
There was no reggaeton.
Maybe in our head. Sorry. That's
but it's definitely uplifting move. We got to work energetically, and we got to and feel when it's time to feel vulnerable, that we have to feel vulnerable, but when it's time to be pumped up and see the change that we could create, we need to feel that. And that's what I hope to do with the film, and that's what I hope I did with the trailer.
You do, my brother, you do. Ohaya Espada, this is for Perfumes. This is a healing, there's a comment. There's a healing release, especially when we couldn't bury all of our loved ones after the hurricane. Question, Macha, do you go to film school? Any advice for those of us who didn't? My primary artistic muscle is writing, and I'm just now developing my visual skills.
I think that film, I did and didn't go to school for film. I actually studied, it's a long story. My story is very curve after curve. I actually studied at Hunter College, and I wanted to study film, but when I got there, I sort of bumped into what was called then the Black and Puerto Rican Studies, and I didn't know you could study that. So I fell in love with that. And I realized that it might be a better idea to study something that was going to give me content to the work that I want to do. And then I'll learn the stuff, the technical stuff later. And it's sort of like what happened. I'll quickly say that I actually was lucky enough to be part of a program that Iris Morales from the Young Lords have started that was called Neon New Opportunity Network. And it was about her proposal was that they took minorities between ages of 17 and 25, and they would teach them the basics of assistant. And it was a way to sort of infiltrate the industry, the film industry and TV industry, so they will get us at the end, like internships or whatever work we could at TA, so we can learn from there. And that's actually where I discovered documentary, and I fell in love with it, and it was a fantastic experience. But I think my biggest lesson, and I would say, just make something. I think film is very crafty. I mean, it's about the craft, you know. They call it a craft for a reason. Is that to me, you can learn while you're making it. So make as many things as you can, share them, get feedback, and then learn from that and keep learning from that over and over. I think better than watch films and analyze them. What you like, what you don't like, what works for you, because I don't think it's a matter of taste. It's what works and what doesn't, right? So and that, I mean, we have so many films available right now digitally, so it's an advantage. Not like when I grew up that you had to sort of like look for, you know, VHS or whatever. Yep. But you know, so watch films and make mistakes and learn from that and do it over and over again.
Very good. Thank you for that. So I have one question for Tristan. How do you see your role as a Puerto Rican from the diaspora?
In like my life, or in
I guess so.
It's a hefty question. I feel like for me, I don't know, just providing like that bridge, I guess, between, you know, people in Puerto Rico and then, you know, just people here. I feel like because of my mixed race, I dabble in a lot of different circles, and I can kind of fluctuate between them, and I understand a lot of different perspectives. So I feel like if anything, I can use my flexibility and my understanding of, you know, different groups of people and stuff to kind of be that gap between like the ignorance and, you know, misunderstanding, misinformation.
Thank you so much. I have one last question, and then we're gonna say this is for Macha. Having a history making being a documentary filmmaker, what drew you to narrative now?
Why is the question?
Having a history making documentaries, what drew you to a narrative now?
It's a different form. It's a different medium. It's a different way to tell story, and in a way that the challenges are different, and it's exciting to me to be able to challenge myself to create dialogue that feels natural, to be able to also create the images that I'm putting out there. You know, there was the cast of this film. It's greatly done. Thinking about that, I wanted to put older women at the center. I wanted to bring brown skin Afro women also to the front of film, a feature film, Puerto Rico, which is not done too often. The types of bodies that I'm using also, I'm thinking about that, like when I'm presenting. So it allows me to really create a world that I can manipulate and handle and present it. And really, to me, especially this film, to me, it was a challenge of representation, of really trying to represent what I think Puerto Rico is really about, which is very mixed in many ways, and we don't see that very often. So it just it just feels like many different challenges that I think are interesting as an artist.
Thank you so much. This has been absolutely wonderful. I want to thank each and every one of you for your time. I want to thank our audience. I want to tell them to please follow these filmmakers, ask them more questions. I know you will have more. Please join us this weekend. And if there's any more information, if you don't have a way of getting in contact with the filmmaker or any of the panelists, please hit us up. Thank you again, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your evening. And
thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.